Is your saw making a burning smell and sparking near the motor brushes? If so, you likely need a new armature. The armature is the central piece of your saw's motor. It works with the field to create the rotation needed to drive your saw. The armature is supported by bearings on both ends. One end has a commutator, which is where the motor brushes apply electricity to the armature. On the opposite end of the armature, the shaft is milled to accept the worm gear. Under normal use, armatures are very reliable and last for many years with no problems. Eventually, the commutator will wear down from the brushes rubbing against it. Most armature issues are caused by overloading the saw. When the saw is overloaded, it draws amperage that is beyond what it was designed to handle. This causes the armature to become hot, and the insulation around the wire wraps will begin to melt or burn. Once enough insulation melts away, the armature will short out, creating excessive sparking around the motor brushes, a burning smell, and reduced speed and performance. Replacing the armature is a somewhat more advanced repair, but it is a repair that you can do yourself, and I'm going to show you how. Hi, I'm Mark Socha. Do-it-yourself repairs like these are easier than you might think. From lawn machines to cordless drills, kitchen mixers, outdoor grills, our how-to videos walk you through each repair from start to finish. So doing it yourself means never having to do it alone. Let's get started. I'll begin by removing the motor brushes. I'll pull this lock lever out of the way so I have access to the brush cap, and then the brush cap just simply unscrews. Then I can pull the brush from the motor. I'll remove the second brush the same way. There are 5 screws that secure the 2 halves of the motor housing together. I'll start by removing this screw that secures the upper guard to the motor housing. Now I'll remove the adjustment lever, starting with the retaining clip. Now the lever will lift away from the saw. Next I'll remove this nut. The washer. Now the quadrant will hinge out of the way, and I can remove the washer in the back so I don't lose it. Now I can separate the 2 halves of the motor housing. I'll use a rubber mallet to tap the housing rearward, and then I can pull it away from the armature. Your worm drive saw uses an oil bath gearbox. Before we can remove the armature the rest of the way, we'll need to drain the oil out of the gearbox and open this nut on the front. So the first thing I'll do is remove the fill nut and drain out all the oil. With the majority of the oil drained from the gearbox, now I can remove this cap. Behind the cap, there's a nut, a bearing, and the worm gear. There's a fair amount of oil that'll sit in front of the bearing that won't drain when you drain the rest of the gearbox. So I'll go ahead and dump that out away from the bearing now. Now I'll remove the nut on the end of the armature. When I put the wrench on it though, the armature is going to just want to spin. So I'll need to hold the armature with one hand as I remove the nut. With the nut removed, now I can pull the armature from the housings. With the armature removed, now there's a couple of parts we'll remove from it to transfer to the new armature, starting with the rear bearing. There's a number of ways you can remove this bearing, one of which would be a 3-leg gear puller. Your typical gear puller is going to have a foot that's too thick to fit between the commutator and the bearing. So an option you have is to take a puller and simply grind the leg down, making it thinner. This can be a handy modification to make to a gear puller, and you'll find lots of uses for it if you do other repair work. Another option is a puller like this one. This is great for tight clearance bearings, but these can be very difficult to find. The third option, and what we're going to use, is a bearing separator. The separator goes between the commutator and the bearing. Tighten up the screws. And I'll take this assembly to the vise for removal. So I've opened the jaws on my vise just wide enough to be able to slide the armature and the bearing separator in them. Now I'm going to place a small socket on the armature shaft. The socket's small enough so it'll pass through the inner race on the bearing. And now I can just tap on the armature shaft until the armature comes free of the bearing. There's a rubber O-ring on the opposite side of the armature shaft, and I'll pull that away. Here I have the new armature. I'll begin reassembly by reinstalling the O-ring. Now replace the rear armature bearing. This is the same one we took off of the old armature. I'll place it over the shaft, and I have another socket I'm going to use to install it. This one is exactly the same diameter as that inner bearing race. I'll place it on top of the race and tap the bearing down into place. I want the face of the bearing flush with the shaft. Just like that. Now I can install the new armature into the gear housing. The worm gear, which is still inside our gear housing, has splines that need to line up with the splines on the armature. So as I insert the armature, I'll rotate it just slightly until those splines engage. The armature shaft goes through the rear bearing into the worm gear. Like I said, I'll just rotate it around until those splines line up, which they just did, and the armature is in place. Now I can secure the armature. There's a really thin washer that goes between the bearing and the nut. This washer may have stuck on the bearing during disassembly, or it may have come free. In either case, if it's free, it goes over the armature, and then I'll secure everything with the lock nut. This is a lock nut, and I don't need to tighten it down too much, just until it's snug. Just like that. Now I can reinstall the front cap. And again, this just needs to be snug. Now we need to replace the oil that we removed from the gearbox. This is a special worm drive gear oil, and it's available on our website. I have the saw sitting level on its base, with the saw blade extended as far as it'll go, basically keeping the gearbox level. I'll add the oil until it comes up to the top of the threads. Need to add this a little at a time, let it settle in place, and then add more. And that's because the oil is so thick. Just about got it. And now I can replace the fill cap. Now I can reassemble the rear half of the motor. Slide it over the armature. And I'll secure it with the 4 housing screws. Now I can reassemble the rear quadrant lock, starting with a thin washer. Then I'll hinge the quadrant into place, another thin washer, the nut, and the lever. At this point, I'll lock down the nut like you normally would when you're securing the base, and then make sure you have the lever in the position you want it to be in. If it were too low, I could just simply remove it, adjust it up to where I want it to be, and then replace the lock ring. Now I'll replace the screw between the blade housing and the motor housing. And I'll finish up by replacing the motor brushes. I'll get the lock lever out of the way, install the brush into the holder, make sure that the spring doesn't kink into the holder as you insert it, and replace the brush cap. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. Be sure to check back often for new videos and expert advice. If you found this video helpful, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment.